This is tape number 5. Today is April 21, 1995. I'm interviewing Mr. Stephen Orlowski. I am Mark Goldberg. We're in Port Washington on Long Island, New York, in the United States, and the language is English. Mr. Orlowski, please tell us about this picture.
This is my father's father, Israel Orlowski. He's...
No mic.
This is my father's father, Israel Orlowski. The picture must be probably taken in the early 30s, after he came from Palestine, laying the cornerstone for the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And he's the man who was murdered by the Germans among the first 50 Jews to be shot in Warsaw.
Sometimes depends where we're standing. I can be behind the monitor, so, okay?
This is the picture of my mother's father, Natan Rosenzweig, or Nusin Rosenzweig. He is the individual who became very wealthy, helped my father, and died a very, I think at least, very brave death, being shot by the German officer sitting behind his desk. This is the picture of my mother and my father shortly after their wedding, after the marriage. They are sitting by the Seine. As you can see, the walls are behind them, is the wall around the Seine. As you may recall from my story, they met in Paris. They were educated in Sorbonne, and they loved very much Paris. Actually, in our house, besides Polish, French was the most frequently spoken language. This is my picture in Radość. I must have been here probably less than 1 year old, and I guess I was very happy at that point. This picture is my portrait when I was 4 years old in 1937. Actually, we were vacationing there, and Mother invited a reasonably well-known portrait painter, his name was Wich Wachtel, to paint both the portraits of my brother and I. I remember running into the house and being quite tired, and I sort of sat at the table and put my head on my arms, and he told me, just stay as you are, and he painted the portrait. My brother had a similar portrait. Those two portraits hung in our parents' bedrooms. After Warsaw was conquered by the Germans, my Aunt Eva went to our apartment. Or maybe I'm wrong, it wasn't after the Germans conquered, it was after the Russians conquered Warsaw. My Aunt Eva went to our apartment looking for anything that she could find, any memorabilia that she could find. And she couldn't find anything else but this portrait, which was taken out of the frame and held by two young guys standing outside the building. And actually she had to buy it from them to obtain it back. She kept on searching for my brother's portrait, and she never found it. There was also a bronze relief of my mother, which she did find, and also she had to buy it from somebody who was holding on to it. Incidentally, maybe just to end the story, in 1963, I met Eva in Israel. At that time, you were not allowed to take objects of art out of Poland, so she made a double bottom to a suitcase just to smuggle this painting, I guess risking to some degree her freedom to bring it out to us. This is a picture of my brother taken somewhere in the street of Warsaw. To the extreme right, you'll see my father standing, wearing a hat and holding a newspaper under his arm. My brother is all the way up front. Incidentally, my brother was a very good-looking boy or kid, and whenever he would walk in the street, people would turn their heads to look at him. And all the way to the right, there is our nanny, Celina, Polish lady who loved us dearly, and unfortunately she died from cancer.
Okay, I think you said
Extreme
your
right?
father was to the extreme right. Isn't your father to the extreme
Extreme
left?
left.
Okay,
Should we correct it there?
we just did.
Oh, okay. This is a picture of Stefan. I would say it's probably in the mid-30s. Stefan was an extremely important person in our survival. Really, if not for her, we would not have survived. As you may recall, she started her own business, became independent, and has done very well, as can be seen maybe from this picture. This is Joseph Frankel, who, as you may recall, Stefan met in the ghetto, and basically, thanks to him, we survived because he got Stefan and my mother working papers at the Schulz factory. This picture is taken after the war in Belgium, and shortly thereafter, he married Stefan, and they lived together in South Africa. He passed away about probably 10 years ago, so. This picture is from 1936. It's my father, myself, and our boxer. Actually, this dog knew that my father was his master, but I was his favorite person. And I remember one of my uncles coming to our apartment and picking up one of my toys, and the dog really went for him. If too many guests came to our house, the dog would grab me and drag me under the table or under a bed, and basically people couldn't get close by to us. Eventually, because of that, my father had to give away the dog. After close to about a year in Bergen-Belsen, we simply have run out of clothes and shoes to wear. The Germans supplied us with those wooden shoes, and this is one of my shoes. Actually, the shoe didn't look as good as it looks now because it was painted green paint. I've worn this shoe for probably a year and a half. If you look at the other side of the shoe, you'll still find pieces of stone embedded in the wood, which are pieces of stone from Bergen-Belsen. Standing in roll calls in this shoe for about an hour and a half, twice a day, I normally would be totally frozen by the time the Germans allowed us back into the barracks. This is the back of the same wooden shoe, which shows the wear and tear of the ground in Bergen-Belsen. I guess today it's somewhat of a holy ground because of all the people that perished there.
Yes, and why?
This document was issued by the camp council in Hillersleben, basically certifying that myself, Kazimierz Stefan Orlowski, was in Bergen-Belsen from July of 1943 to April of 1945, that I was born in Warsaw. Incidentally, here it should be noticed that my birth date is 1935, but truly it was 1933. Being younger, after the war, we would get slightly larger portions of food. So therefore Stefan recorded both of us as being younger than we really were. Also, below that, there is both in English and French the story, in a couple of sentences, how we were liberated at the train after leaving Bergen-Belsen on April the 7th and liberated on April the 13th, one day after Roosevelt died. This is a document issued by the Polish consulate in Belgium, Brussels, when we arrived in Brussels from Hillersleben. Stefan and Joseph Frankel went to any and every possible place where we could get help. and one of them was the Polish consulate. Here again, my name appears, and my birth date is off by 2 years. But other than this document indicates that we arrived in Brussels sometimes in late June or early July. This is a picture of my brother, the way I remember him from the war years, probably from the early war years. I would say it's probably from the ghetto in 1941 maybe, or something like this. It must have been taken for some kind of a document, but I'm not too sure. This picture is my picture after the war, so it must be 1945, so I was about 11 or 12 years old. It was simply taken for documentation purposes. I remember they put us all on a long bench, and you can see my aunt's arm next to me. Those pictures were later cut up and used for documents.
Which aunt is next to you?
This is Aunt Stefan. Okay. This is the picture where we arrived from the boat Matroua, who brought us from Marseille, and we are entering the athlete camp. As you can see in the background, British police guarding us. We just got off the train, and to the extreme right of the picture, the boy carrying, not the first boy, but the second boy, carrying a suitcase with his hair parted in the middle of his forehead, is my brother. I am on the other side of the picture, standing with mainly looking at the British officers. I am on the background of the first British officer. And basically what happened there, it was quite funny because there was a ditch dug and nobody could notice it. And people getting off the train kept on falling into the ditch. So I stood there looking at the people falling into the ditch, and I thought it was quite funny.
Hey, the athlete camp is in Palestine.
Athlete camp is in Palestine. This was sort of the initial camp where anybody who came to Palestine legally was taken to Athlete, and after a couple of weeks there was sent to whatever destination he was supposed to go.
And this is late in...
This was in September of 1945. This is a picture taken about 6-7 years ago of the building in which we lived in the ghetto, Żelazna 62. Actually, this is the corner of Kochmalna and Żelazna. I think Kochmalna is a better known street. It's surprising that this building survived because basically the ghetto during the uprising was totally burned down, then bulldozed, and a new city was built on top of the ghetto, which is probably about 3 or 4 feet higher than the rest of Warsaw, just because the ghetto is under that, all the ruins of the ghetto. This building and maybe another 2 or 3 or 4 buildings survived standing as they were, almost as they were. As most buildings in Warsaw, even this building had an inner court. To the left of the building you can see a brown door, which was the exit from the inner court to the street. This picture again was taken just a few years ago. You can also see a shack, which 50 years ago was a shoemaker's shack. We as children used to play here in the yard during the ghetto years. And I remember that a man committed suicide, and he fell on the corner of this shack. Obviously, the man committed suicide 50 years ago, but this shack is still standing there. I guess things really have not changed much in Warsaw over the 50 years. Now, funny enough, in spite of this building surviving among the very few in the ghetto, you can see a void in the back of the building, and this is where our apartment was on the 4th floor. So besides this part of the building, which must have been sheared by a bomb, the building has survived, but we were never able to go back to our apartment because it's no longer there.
The last three pictures.
Those last three pictures were taken on our trip to Poland, my brother and I, in 1988 or so, just to fix the timing of when those pictures were taken.